The stars looked different from the observation deck of the USS Constellation. Lieutenant Commander Eric Miller stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the approaching lights of the alien vessel. His stomach tightened. After 20 years in Navy intelligence, he never thought he'd be humanity's representative at a first contact meeting. "Nervous?" asked Captain Kate Summers, stepping beside him. As the ship's military psychologist, she had been added to the team at the last minute. "Wouldn't you be?" Eric replied, not taking his eyes off the growing speck of light. "We're about to meet aliens who could destroy our planet if they wanted to." The Varaxian ship was massive, at least 3 times the size of the Constellation. It gleamed like polished obsidian against the blackness of space. Earth had detected the aliens 6 months ago, when their signals began appearing on deep space monitoring equipment. After weeks of basic language exchange, this meeting had been arranged. "They seem peaceful enough," Kate said. "Their communications suggest they're more curious than hostile." Eric nodded but didn't feel reassured. "I've studied every transmission. There's something condescending in their tone, like they're talking to children." The ship's intercom crackled. "Lieutenant Commander Miller and Captain Summers to the main airlock. Our guests have arrived." The Varaxians were tall, with gray-blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the ship's lights. Their eyes, 4 of them, arranged in a diamond pattern, blinked, independently of each other. The lead alien wore an ornate uniform with symbols Eric couldn't decipher. "I am Zexthal, ambassador of the Varaxian hegemony," the alien said through a translator device. Its voice sounded metallic but understandable. "We bring greetings from the 17 worlds of our coalition." Admiral Frank Doyle, the highest-ranking officer on the Constellation, stepped forward. "Welcome aboard the USS Constellation. I'm Admiral Doyle. This is Lieutenant Commander Miller and Captain Summers, who will be your main contacts during your stay." The alien's upper eyes focused on Eric while the lower pair examined Kate. "Your vessel is quaint," Zexthal said. "We have studied your transmissions. Your species is young but shows potential." Another Varaxian stepped forward, smaller and dressed in simpler clothing. "I am Korvek's chief researcher. I have been studying your culture with great interest." Its speech seemed more enthusiastic. "Your stories, especially, are fascinating." Eric felt a sudden unease. "Our stories?" "Yes," Korvex continued. "Your horror and war narratives. Such imagination. Such primitive fears manifested in creative ways. My team has collected thousands of examples." Zexthal made a sound that the translator didn't catch, something like laughter. "Your species invents such elaborate fantasies about combat and violence. It is amusing." Admiral Doyle's smile remained fixed, but Eric caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in the conference room. We've prepared refreshments suitable for your biology." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Eric noticed how the Varaxians seemed to look down at everything, literally and figuratively. They stood nearly 7 feet tall and moved with fluid grace that made the humans seem clumsy by comparison. In the conference room, the Varaxians settled onto specially designed chairs. Several more of their kind had joined them, scientists, military officers, and cultural experts according to their introductions. "We have reviewed your historical records," said a Varaxian, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. "Your methods of warfare are interesting but extremely inefficient." "How so?" asked Admiral Doyle, his voice carefully neutral. "You fight on the ground face to face. You use explosives that destroy resources. You employ psychological tactics that would never work on advanced minds." The alien officer's upper eyes blinked in sequence. "We have evolved beyond such approaches." Eric noticed Kate taking careful notes, her expression thoughtful. During the next few hours, the Varaxians explained their coalition, 17 planets spanning 3 star systems, united under a single government. They had existed for over 2,000 years, expanding gradually and incorporating new worlds into their hegemony. "And these worlds all joined willingly?" Eric asked. Zexthal's 4 eyes blinked in an unsettling pattern. "Most saw the benefits of our protection and guidance. Some required convincing." A chill ran down Eric's spine. After the meeting, Corvex approached Eric with a small device. "I would like to show you something," the alien said, activating a holographic display. Images of human books, movies, and games appeared, all centered on war, horror, and survival. "Your species spends much time imagining threats and violence," Corvex said. "Why do humans frighten themselves with stories about monsters and brutal warfare?" Eric considered his answer carefully. "Maybe because preparing for the worst helps us survive." Corvex made that same untranslatable sound, like laughter but hollow. "But these scenarios are impossible. These tactics would never work against an advanced civilization." "Perhaps not," Eric said. "But imagination has saved us many times." Later that night, Eric met with Kate and Admiral Doyle in a secure room. "Their attitude concerns me," Eric said. "They're dismissing everything about us, our technology, our military, even our stories." Kate nodded. "It's textbook colonizer behavior. They see us as primitive natives. I caught their military officers actually smirking during your presentation on Earth's defense capabilities." Admiral Doyle looked grim. "We need to prepare for the worst. Their ship has weapons capabilities far beyond ours. I've already contacted Earth Command." "What did Corvex want with you?" Kate asked Eric. "He's collecting our fiction. War stories, horror, survival narratives. Seems to find them childish." Eric frowned, but there was something else, almost like he's trying to understand what makes us tick. Over the next few days, more Varaxians arrived. Scientists, military observers, cultural experts. They all shared the same dismissive attitude toward human capabilities. Eric found Corvex in the ship's library downloading military history books. "Your people fought world wars against yourselves?" The alien seemed both fascinated and appalled. "We did," Eric admitted. "Humanity has a complex history. And these horror stories, monsters that hunt in darkness, invisible threats, psychological warfare, these are entertainment? Sometimes the best way to face our fears is to explore them through fiction." Corvex made a dismissive gesture. "Childish fears. Advanced civilizations outgrow such things." 6 months later, a fleet of 50 Varaxian ships appeared in Earth's orbit. Their message was simple. Earth would join the Varaxian hegemony as a resource world or face pacification. As Admiral Doyle organized Earth's defense forces, Eric remembered Corvex's dismissive words about human warfare and horror stories. The aliens had studied human fiction as entertainment, never realizing they were reading a warning. Admiral Frank Doyle stood in the underground war room beneath the Rocky Mountains. Screens around him showed the 50 Varaxian ships in Earth's orbit. 6 months of peaceful talks had ended with an ultimatum: surrender or be conquered. "They've given us 48 hours to decide," Eric Miller said, joining him at the central table. "Their ambassador says they prefer a peaceful transition of power." Doyle's face hardened. "I bet they do. How's our defense plan coming?" "Military." Analyst Lisa Ward approached with a tablet. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "Not good, sir. Their technology outmatches ours in every category. Their ships have energy shields we can't penetrate with our current weapons." "What about their ground forces?" Doyle asked. "Based on the data they've shared, they have mechanized infantry with advanced armor and energy weapons. 1 Varaxian soldier might equal 10 of ours in a direct fight." Eric looked at the tactical displays. "But they don't expect to fight at all, do they?" Lisa shook her head. "No. From my conversations with their military observers, they expect us to surrender. When I asked about their combat experience, they mentioned standard pacification protocols that have worked on other planets. They've been studying us for months," Kate Summers added, joining the group. "But they've focused on our mainstream military tactics and conventional warfare. They've completely dismissed our history of asymmetric warfare, resistance movements, and guerrilla tactics." A new voice joined the conversation. "That's our advantage." Captain Jack Russell, a Special Forces commander with 20 years of experience, stepped forward. "They think they know how we fight. They don't." The next day, world leaders gathered to discuss the Varaxian ultimatum. Most faces on the video screens looked defeated. Their technology is too advanced, the European Union representative said. Fighting would only lead to massive civilian casualties. The Chinese president nodded in agreement. Perhaps we should negotiate terms that would protect our people, even if we lose our independence. Admiral Doyle stepped up to the microphone. With respect, surrendering is exactly what they expect. They've studied our conventional capabilities and determined we can't win, but they've missed something critical. He nodded to Eric, who began presenting images from the 6 months of cultural exchange. The Varaxians have been collecting our stories, our books, films, games, particularly war stories and horror. They find them amusing like children's tales. Eric pulled up video of Korvax laughing at human war films. They think these are just entertainment. They don't realize these stories reflect real human capabilities and historical tactics. Captain Russell took over. I've analyzed their military doctrine. It's built on overwhelming force and technology. They have no concept of the unconventional warfare humans have perfected over centuries. Their soldiers have never faced an enemy that fights from the shadows, that adapts, that uses their own strength against them. Are you suggesting we can win against their technology? The Russian president asked skeptically. No, Doyle said firmly. I'm suggesting we can make victory so costly they'll be forced to negotiate. We need to show them that humans aren't the primitive children they think we are. Over the next 24 hours, a plan formed. On the surface, Earth would appear to be considering surrender. Meanwhile, military forces would prepare for a very different kind of war. In a secure room, Lisa Ward met with hackers from around the world. Their ships use a communication system similar to our quantum networks. We need to find a way in. In another facility, Dr. Olivia Green studied Varaxian biological samples they had willingly provided during cultural exchanges. Their auditory range is different from ours, she explained to her team, and their visual processing has weaknesses we can exploit. They evolved on a world with less environmental variation than Earth. Captain Russell's Special Forces teams began training with unusual equipment. These aren't weapons they'll expect, he told his soldiers as they practiced with devices that looked more like tools than guns. Eric Miller found himself working with Hollywood directors and video game designers. We need to understand exactly what they found so amusing about our horror stories, he told the creative team. Because we're about to show them those nightmares are based on reality. When the 48 hours were nearly up, Ambassador Zexthal arrived at the United Nations for Earth's answer. The alien stood tall and confident, all 4 eyes blinking in that unsettling pattern. We hope you have chosen wisely, Zexthal said to the assembled human representatives. The hegemony offers protection and guidance to developing species such as yours. The UN Secretary-General stepped forward. We have a counter-proposal. Earth wishes to join your hegemony as an equal partner, not a subject world. Zexthal's upper eyes narrowed. That is not possible. Your civilization is too young, too undeveloped. You have not even mastered interstellar travel. Yet, we have mastered something you haven't, Admiral Doyle said, joining the conversation. And what might that be, human? The alien asked with clear disdain. Survival against all odds. Zexthal made that untranslatable laughing sound. Your confidence is misplaced. We have studied your military capabilities extensively. You cannot stand against us. You've studied our conventional forces, Doyle agreed. But have you studied our history? Vietnam? Afghanistan? The countless times a technologically superior force was defeated by people who refused to fight by the expected rules? For the first time, Zexthal seemed uncertain. Your primitive guerrilla tactics would not work against our technology. Perhaps not, Doyle said. But are you willing to risk finding out? To risk the lives of your soldiers to take a planet that might instead become a valuable ally? Before the alien could respond, the lights in the UN building flickered. On every screen and device, including the alien's translator, a simple message appeared. We are already in your systems. It was a bluff mostly, but Lisa's team had managed to briefly penetrate the outer layers of the Varaxian communication network. Sexthal's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. This is unexpected. I must consult with the Hegemony Council. When the alien left, Eric turned to Doyle. That won't buy us much time. No, Doyle agreed. But it shows they can be surprised. And surprised enemies make mistakes. 3 hours later, the answer came. The Varaxian fleet launched its first attacks against Earth's satellite defense systems. As orbital weapons platforms were destroyed one by one, Korvac sent a personal message to Eric. I have recommended a full study of human warfare throughout history, the alien researcher wrote. But the military command believes this unnecessary. They say humans will fight as all primitive species fight, directly and predictably. Eric sent back only one reply. You should have paid more attention to our horror stories. The invasion of Earth had begun. The first Varaxian ships entered Earth's atmosphere 3 days after the invasion began. They looked like giant metal teardrops, gleaming in the sunlight as they descended toward major cities. Humanity's air defenses had been quickly overwhelmed. Just as the aliens had predicted, what they hadn't predicted was that humanity wouldn't use their air defenses at all. Let them land, Admiral Doyle had ordered. Let them think the path is clear. Marine Sergeant Paul Martinez watched from his hidden position as 5 alien ships landed in the fields outside Chicago. He and his squad had been hiding underground for 2 days, waiting. The tunnel system they'd hastily built was inspired by those used in the Vietnam War, something the Varaxians had dismissed as primitive and unsuitable for modern combat. All units hold position, came the whispered command through his earpiece. Wait for them to deploy fully. The alien ships opened, and troops marched out in perfect formation. Their armor gleamed silver and blue, and they carried weapons that looked like sleek rifles made of the same material as their ships. The Varaxians moved with confidence, clearly expecting no resistance. They're not even in combat formation, whispered Luis, one of Paul's soldiers. They're parading. They think this is a peacekeeping mission, not a war, Paul replied. That's their first mistake. The Varaxian commander stood at the front, scanning the area with all 4 eyes. It seemed confused by the lack of resistance, or even people. Chicago appeared abandoned. All units, execute Operation Nightmare, came Admiral Doyle's voice through all communication channels. Across the globe, at each Varaxian landing site, humans emerged from hiding, not to fight directly but to implement the strangest battle plan in Earth's history. In Chicago, Paul's team activated devices designed by Dr. Olivia Green. The small machines emitted sounds at frequencies that humans couldn't hear, but that hit the Varaxians' sensitive auditory range perfectly. The effect was immediate. The alien soldiers began looking around in confusion, some clutching at the sides of their heads. Sound weapons deployed, Paul reported. Moving to Phase 2, underground tunnels suddenly opened beneath the aliens' feet. Not all of them, that would be too predictable, but just enough to create chaos in their formation. Varaxians fell into the pits, their perfect lines broken. Similar scenes played out at landing sites around the world. In Paris, the aliens found themselves caught in simple but effective traps. In Beijing, they faced buildings rigged to collapse in carefully planned ways. In Rio de Janeiro, the very environment was turned against them as the humid air was filled with compounds that interfered with their armor's sensors. None of these tactics would work for long. The Varaxians were smart and would adapt. But humanity didn't need to win. They just needed to create enough doubt and fear to force negotiations. The USS Invincible, a submarine deep in the Pacific Ocean, Captain Diane Wells monitored the global situation. Her vessel had been chosen as a mobile command center, specifically because the Varaxians, focused on space warfare, had largely ignored Earth's oceans. The first phase is working better than expected, she told Eric Miller, who had joined her team. They're completely disoriented by our approach. Eric nodded, watching the data streams from around the world. They expected us to either surrender or fight conventionally. They have no concept of our history with asymmetric warfare. On one screen, they watched live footage from London. The Varaxians had landed in Hyde Park, But instead of finding military resistance, they encountered simple holographic projectors, showing scenes from human horror movies. To humans, these would be recognized as fiction. To the aliens who had never understood the concept of horror entertainment, the effect was confusing and unsettling. Psychological warfare, Kate Summers explained, pointing to biometric data being collected from captured Varaxian equipment. They're experiencing something like fear, though their biology processes it differently. In orbit, the Varaxian fleet commanders were growing frustrated. Their ground troops reported chaotic conditions, nothing like the simple pacification they had expected. The humans are not fighting as predicted, a Varaxian general reported to Ambassador Zexthal. They're using methods not found in their military databases. Impossible, Zexthal replied. We studied their tactics extensively. They're fighting like the creatures in their horror narratives, said Corvex, who had been monitoring the situation with growing concern. They're fighting from shadows, using our expectations against us, exploiting weaknesses we didn't know we had. On the ground, the Varaxians began to adapt. They adjusted their sensors to detect the tunnel systems and started using scanning technology to find hidden humans. But each time they adjusted, humanity changed tactics. In what had once been Detroit, a Varaxian commander led a full company to clear out a reported human stronghold. They found an abandoned factory filled with mannequins posed in disturbing ways. While they were confused by this apparent waste of effort, the real attack came, not with guns, but with simple chemical compounds that reacted with their armors, cooling systems, forcing them to shed their protection or risk overheating. Paul Martinez and his squad observed from a distance as the aliens struggled with their suddenly malfunctioning equipment. They still think they're fighting a conventional war, Paul said. They're looking for an enemy they can shoot. When do we actually engage? Luis asked. Not until we have to. Our job is to make them question everything, their intelligence, their technology, their understanding of humans. The Varaxian ship hovering above suddenly fired energy weapons at the factory, completely destroying it and the surrounding area. They're getting desperate, Paul noted. That's good. Aboard the USS Invincible, Eric received a communication from Corvex. The alien researcher seemed troubled. Your species fights in ways not documented in your military records, the message read. Where did you learn these tactics? Eric sent back a simple reply. We told you in our stories, you just weren't listening. By the end of the first week, the Varaxians had secured only a fraction of their expected territory. Their casualties weren't high by the standards of war, but for a species that expected minimal resistance, each loss was shocking. They're calling an emergency meeting of their command structure, Lisa Ward reported, based on intercepted communications. We've confused them, but they'll adapt eventually. Their technology is still far superior. Admiral Doyle nodded grimly. Then it's time for Phase 2. They've seen our nightmares. Now let's show them our monsters. The order went out worldwide. Operation Nightmare was now moving to its second phase. Humanity was about to show the Varaxians why they should have paid more attention to those horror stories they found so amusing. 2 weeks into the invasion, the Varaxian commander Keldash called an emergency meeting aboard the main fleet ship. Holographic images of battlefield reports floated around the command center as officers from various landing zones reported their findings. This is unacceptable, Keldash said, his four eyes blinking in an angry pattern. How can a pre-interstellar species cause such problems for our forces? The humans are not fighting according to any known doctrine, said his second-in-command. They avoid direct conflict. They set traps. They use our own technology against us. Corvex, who had been invited to provide cultural insight, stepped forward. I believe they are using tactics described in their fictional stories, the ones we dismissed as primitive entertainment. Keldash made a dismissive gesture. Fiction cannot be the basis for effective warfare. Yet we have lost nearly 15% of our ground forces with almost nothing to show for it. Another officer countered. We control less than 5% of their major population centers. Outside Phoenix, Arizona, Colonel Greg Bennett prepared the next phase of humanity's defense. Special operations teams had gathered from around the world, bringing with them equipment that looked nothing like standard military gear. Are we really going through with this? asked Lieutenant Steve Carson, looking at the specialized gear laid out before them. Greg nodded. The Varaxians studied our conventional weapons and tactics. They prepared for those. They didn't prepare for what scared us in our own stories. The equipment included modified combat suits designed to resemble creatures from humanity's darkest nightmares. Some had extra limbs attached that moved with the soldiers' movements. Others contained technologies that altered voices or created visual effects that would confuse Varaxian sensors. Remember, Greg told his troops, this isn't about killing them. It's about making them question everything they thought they knew about humans. It's about creating fear. Michelle Peterson, who led one of the Special Forces teams, picked up her helmet. It had been modified to display different facial images that would shift and change in ways that Varaxian visual processing would find deeply disturbing. Their psychology is different from ours, she reminded her squad. What scares us might not scare them. But Dr. Green's team found something interesting in their biology. They have an instinctive fear response to rapid, unpredictable movement and certain sound patterns. As night fell, Operation Nightmare's second phase began. The Varaxians, used to fighting in daylight with their superior technology, suddenly faced a new kind of attack. In the forests outside Vancouver, Varaxian troops patrolled an area they thought was secure. Their sensors detected nothing unusual, until strange sounds began to emerge from the darkness. The sounds matched nothing in their databases. Not animal calls, not human voices, but something in between that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then the attacks began. Human soldiers in modified armor moved in ways that confused Varaxian motion tracking. They appeared and disappeared, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Their armor, painted with light-absorbing materials, made them nearly invisible to standard scans. "What is this?" a Varaxian soldier asked, its voice showing stress for the first time. "This is not how humans fight in their military records." Aboard the USS Invincible, Eric Miller watched the reports coming in from around the world. The Varaxians were experiencing something they had never faced before. Actual fear. "We're inside their decision loop now," Admiral Doyle said, studying the tactical displays. "They plan, we change. They adapt, we shift again." Lisa Ward pointed to data streams from captured Varaxian communication devices. "They're trying to understand what's happening. Their commanders are demanding explanations for why humans are fighting like..." She paused, reading the translation. "Like the nightmare creatures from our entertainment." Eric couldn't help but smile. They thought our horror stories were just fantasies. They never realized those stories were how we prepare ourselves for the worst. How we face our fears by exploring them. In orbit, Keldash made a decision that would change the course of the war. "Deploy the restricted weapons," he ordered. "We will end this quickly." His officers looked shocked. "The Hegemony Council has not authorized extinction-level weapons for this world," one protested. "I am not suggesting extinction," Keldash replied. "Only enough force to break their resistance. Use the atmospheric modifiers." On Earth, the sky began to change. Clouds formed in unnatural patterns as Varaxian ships released chemicals designed to alter weather patterns. Storm systems of unprecedented power began to form over major human population centers. But humanity had planned for this too. Dr. Olivia Green's team had studied Varaxian atmospheric technology from the limited data shared during the cultural exchanges. "They're trying to control our weather," she told the Defense Council via secure communication. "But they don't understand Earth's complex atmospheric systems. Their models are based on more predictable planets." Captain Diane Wells directed the USS Invincible to a new position. "Launch the countermeasures," she ordered. Across the oceans, specially designed submarines released compounds that interacted with the Varaxian chemicals, creating effects the aliens couldn't have predicted. Instead of destroying human cities, their weather weapons created conditions that interfered with their own ship's sensors. In London, now partially occupied by Varaxian forces, Special Forces operator Michelle Peterson led her team through abandoned subway tunnels. They carried devices designed by Earth's best scientists based on reverse-engineered Varaxian technology. "Remember," she told her team, "we're not trying to defeat their entire army. We just need to create enough uncertainty that they question their approach. Her team emerged in the heart of the Varaxian command post. Instead of attacking with conventional weapons, they activated devices that broadcast directly into the Varaxian communication network. The signal contained images and sounds from humanity's darkest horror creations, but modified to target Varaxian sensory systems. The effect was immediate. The alien soldiers began to move erratically, their coordinated actions breaking down. As their sensory inputs became confused, Michelle's team slipped away before they could be caught, but the damage was done. Reports of similar attacks came in from Varaxian outposts around the world. In his command ship, Kel-Dash received the disturbing reports. "This is impossible," he said, watching video feeds of his troops in disarray. "How can they know our neurological vulnerabilities? We never shared that data." Korvex, who had been analyzing human responses, looked troubled. "I believe they figured it out by watching how we react to their world. They are more observant than we realized." "This ends now," Kel-Dash decided. "Prepare the final phase weapons. We will not be defeated by a species that doesn't even have interstellar travel." But as his crew moved to obey, warning alarms sounded throughout the ship. Somehow, humans had gained access to their communication systems. On every screen aboard every Varaxian vessel, the same message appeared, translated into their language. "You should have paid attention to our stories. This is only the beginning." 1 month into the invasion, the Varaxian fleet hung in Earth's orbit like wounded predators. Their once perfect formation was now scattered and defensive. On the planet below, their ground forces had withdrawn from most major cities, consolidating into fortified positions. Kel-Dash stared at the holographic display of Earth with all 4 eyes narrowed in frustration. What had begun as a simple pacification had become the worst military disaster in Varaxian history. 28% of our ground forces lost, reported his second-in-command. 17 ships damaged beyond repair, and we control less than 2% of the planet's strategic locations. "How?" Kel-Dash demanded, slamming his hand on the console. "How could primitives do this?" Korvex, who had spent the past weeks analyzing human tactics, stepped forward. "I believe we fundamentally misunderstood humans from the beginning. We thought their violent stories were fantasy. They were not. They were history and preparation." Andrea. Earth. Admiral Doyle gathered with his command staff in the underground war room. The monitors showed Varaxian forces retreating across the globe. "They're regrouping," Lisa Ward said, studying the tactical displays. "Probably preparing for one final push with everything they have left. Then we need to end this before more people die on either side," Doyle replied. "It's time for the final phase." Eric Miller looked up from his communications panel. "Sir, we're receiving a message from the Varaxian command ship. They're requesting a direct conversation with our leadership." Doyle nodded. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing Kel-Dash and several other Varaxian leaders. Their usual confident posture was gone. They looked tense, even by alien standards. "Human leaders," Kel-Dash began, his translator making his voice sound flat and mechanical. "The current conflict has proven costly for both sides. We propose a temporary cessation of hostilities to discuss terms." Doyle and Eric exchanged glances. This was what they had been fighting for. Not a complete victory, which was impossible against the Varaxians' technology, but a chance to negotiate as equals rather than conquered subjects. "We are willing to discuss terms," Doyle replied carefully. "But first we need to understand why you're willing to talk now." Kel-Dash's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Your species has demonstrated unexpected capabilities. The hegemony wishes to avoid further losses while we reassess." 3 days later, representatives from Earth and the Varaxian hegemony met on neutral ground, an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The location had been chosen carefully. It demonstrated human military capability while remaining non-threatening. Admiral Doyle led the human delegation, with Eric Miller, Kate Summers, and diplomat Alan Rhodes at his side. The Varaxians sent Kel-Dash, Ambassador Zexthal, and to everyone's surprise, Korvex. "Before we begin formal negotiations," Korvex said as they all took their seats, "I wish to understand something. How did you know our vulnerabilities? Our physical and psychological weaknesses? Kate Summers smiled slightly. We watched. We listened. When you shared information about your biology during cultural exchanges, you thought you were being generous with a primitive species. We were studying you just as carefully as you were studying us. But the tactics, Keldash insisted, the psychological warfare, the way you seemed to know exactly how to disrupt our sensory systems, that information was never shared. No, Eric agreed. But you shared enough for us to figure out the rest. Humans are very good at finding patterns and exploiting weaknesses. It's how we survived on a planet full of predators. Which brings me to my report, Korvax said, turning to address both delegations. I have completed my analysis of human history and behavior. My conclusion is that we severely underestimated this species. He activated a holographic display showing scenes from Earth's history, wars, disasters, explorations. Humans evolved on a planet with extreme environmental variations, constant natural disasters, and thousands of competing species. Their history is a continuous struggle for survival. What we mistook as primitive entertainment, their horror and war stories, are actually cultural tools for preparing each generation for threats. Ambassador Zexthal looked troubled. Are you suggesting humans are naturally more violent than other species? No, Korvax replied. I am suggesting they are naturally more resilient, more adaptive. Where other species might surrender when faced with overwhelming technology, humans become more creative, more determined. They don't fight like a military. They fight like a species that has been fighting for its existence since it first evolved. The negotiations lasted for days. The Varaxians, no longer approaching from a position of unquestioned superiority, were forced to treat humans as equals. Earth would not join the hegemony as a subject world, but would establish diplomatic relations as an independent planet. On the final day, as the formal agreement was being prepared, Eric found Korvax studying a collection of human books. Horror, novels, war memoirs, survival guides. I still don't understand why you find these entertaining, the alien said, holding up a dog-eared copy of a horror novel. Eric thought for a moment. I think we tell scary stories to prepare ourselves for real fears. It's how we face the darkness, by exploring it in safety first. Korvax made a gesture that Eric had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. My recommendation to the Hegemony Council will be to study human culture much more carefully before approaching any other worlds. You are the first species we've encountered that became more dangerous when threatened, not less. We're not naturally violent, Eric clarified. We just don't give up easily. No, Korvax agreed. You certainly don't. When the agreement, soon to be known as the Earth Accords, was finally signed, it marked not only peace between Earth and the Varaxian hegemony, but a fundamental shift in how the aliens viewed humanity. 6. Months later, Eric visited the first Varaxian cultural center established on Earth. Inside, he found a special exhibition about human literature and film. The horror and war sections were prominently displayed with a sign that read, "Warning. These are not mere entertainment, but reflections of actual human psychological and tactical capabilities." Next to it stood Korvax, now serving as the hegemony's ambassador to Earth. Your people have changed how we approach new civilizations, the alien told Eric. We've begun studying the stories of every world we contact. It seems we've been missing important information. Eric smiled. Stories are powerful things. They prepare us for our nightmares so we can face them when they become real. Yes, Korvax agreed, all four eyes focused on a nearby display of classic human horror films. We learned that lesson the hard way. As news of Earth's successful defense spread throughout the galaxy, other alien civilizations began to take notice of the small blue planet. They studied humanity's history and stories with new respect and caution. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through superior technology, but by turning its worst nightmares into its greatest strength.